Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Hostility. I know it's been a gazillion years since I did a Hostility. I like to save them for something special. By the way, there's few hundred people who have already managed to clock in, and yet only 8 of you hit the like button. If you're here this early, you already know you like it. What the hell are you waiting for? I mean, there's, somebody in chat pointed it out. You don't need to wait. You can just do it right now. Also, we're going to be talking about a couple of different documentaries, a new one and a previous one that was kind of my introduction to tonight's guest in a way. But we will always put theists to the head of the queue. So if you're a theist, if you're a God believer of some sort, and you have questions about either documentary or the process or anything else, you get to go right to the head of the queue. And if you're a godless heathen wanting to talk about these documentaries and these subjects, you still should go ahead and call in. We're not necessarily limiting it tonight. And so my guest tonight, filmmaker, author, friend extraordinaire, Chris Johnson. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
So we'll get to the older documentary at some point, which,
Yeah.
for ages, I would just keep directing people to atheistbook.com, which I think is now partially closed or completely
The
closed. I don't
sales
think
are
it can get to both.
closed.
Yeah,
The sales are closed, but the site is still there.
I'm
Yeah.
still there. Well, you have done a brand new multi-part documentary,
Yeah.
and it's called I Bid You Peace, and it's about the frugal gourmet. How how did you decide on that subject to actually to make a film? And actually, it's in multiple parts, so it feels like it's like a couple of films, really, even though it's cohesive. But how'd you decide on the subject?
Well, I grew up in Seattle, and Jeff Smith, who is known as the Frugal Gourmet, was also from Seattle. And so growing up in the 80s and 90s here, he was kind of a local celebrity and people knew him and he was on the local TV a lot. But he was a huge figure in the 80s and 90s on public television uh, doing a food prep program, teaching Americans about food from all around the world. But his life was very complicated and multifaceted. And when I heard about kind of how things turned out with him, I thought there's a story here. And so I looked into it, and 5 episodes later, it all unravels. So yeah.
So so what what did you know about him and the story and the surprises, I guess, before you went into this, and what new things did you kind of discover in this process?
Um, I basically, I remembered him from watching him on TV when I was a kid. And then I forgot about him for 30 years. And then
Sure.
right before the pandemic, I stumbled across one of his YouTube videos of his show from the 80s, early 80s. And what I was really amazed at was that it was a 30-minute straight to camera cooking shows. There's no editing, nothing. And he would just do these kind of almost like sermons in a way. He was an ordained minister, and so he would do these kind of sermons about history and food and culture, and it was fascinating that he had that ability to do that. And then I read a little bit more about kind of what had happened in terms of his downfall and the allegations. And I didn't know if these allegations were true or not, or what had happened. And so I kind of started looking into it more and more. And again, found this really interesting story. And I spoke to hundreds of people about it. And I mean, I really, the thing that really struck me about him in learning more and speaking to people was how polarizing he really was. Would speak to one person and they would say, "Oh, I knew him and he was wonderful and generous and amazing and just the most charismatic person I ever met." And then I'd hang up the phone and talk to the next person and they would say, "He was a monster and I hope he's rotting in hell." And
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking about the same person here? It was fascinating, just that duality there.
Yeah, it's very clear. I mean, I've watched the entire documentary. It's clear, and it is jarring to watch different people tell their version of interacting with him. Now we're talking about someone who was an ordained minister, but he's not. I mean, I'm not even sure how many people apart from like serious regular viewers would have known that that was true. And yet he seems to have held on to that mindset, that aspect of who he was throughout the entirety of this completely separate career, where at times to me, listening to people talk about him, he felt more like a guru minister that happened to be doing food stuff than a chef who happened to be an ordained minister.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. I think that's true. I think that he saw himself as this kind of larger than life figure, or at least his public persona as this larger than life figure. And I think the cooking, I wouldn't say the cooking was incidental to that, but it certainly, I think the charisma took kind of the driver's seat in that situation. He was all about himself, and he was all about um, the character he was playing. And
Yeah,
I think
you
that's
talk
true.
about
Yeah,
his
character.
charisma.
Yeah.
His charisma, it's for a lot of people who are somewhat like this, not that there's anybody who's necessarily just like him, um, it does end up a very much love him or hate him, where there are people who are drawn to this person. And when we discuss some of the allegations a little bit later, I had some observations about that. But there's an aspect of this that you and I have met others in similar situations and had conversations at a different time, where there are a lot of ministers who appear to be, or absolutely are, repressing aspects of their sexuality and their character. And so there's a former or a friend of his in the documentary who I can't recall if he ever actually says, "Oh yeah, Jeffrey was gay," but he talked about the conversations that they had, and it seemed like Jeffrey never truly came out to him, and yet it was kind of a "that's just the way it is" sort of thing. Uh,
Yeah.
I guess you can speak more to that because it strikes me a lot of this. The questions I have are: do people growing up with that are struggling with their sexuality, are they more likely perhaps to trend towards ministry to maybe stop these urges, or is ministry the beard? Is it something they're oblivious to? How do we get there?
I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know for sure, if it's more common with clergy or ministers. That would be interesting to kind of look into in terms of perhaps, you know, people who are ex-ministers or, formerly religious or clergy. Um, but that is one of the things that is so sad about the whole story too, is just I mean, I don't know if this is provocative to say, but just the waste, the complete waste of time and effort on trying to hold that image up, that straight heterosexual um, image, and hiding yourself. And as somebody says in the documentary, that must be exhausting, always playing a character and not being able to kind of be who you are, and also turning that repression onto other, innocent people as well. I think there's an aspect to that anger and that repression that he kind of funneled towards unsuspecting victims.
It's now he was a Methodist minister, and so we're not talking about a fire and brimstone evangelical. We're talking about a I'm going to have wine and make good food, and I can be. And I would say for me, just my impression watching this, because I grew up watching him on occasion too. He wasn't my favorite of the PBS chefs, but I do remember watching. I watched him. I watched Julia Child, and I love the 30-minute direct to camera. I mean, he's in some ways he's like the Bob Ross of food, in that format of I'm going to get this done in this time frame, whereas other shows were often edited,
Mhm.
and I liked that. But when we're talking about this I grew up a Southern Baptist, and so when I think minister, I think that. And it's very clear to me that Methodist ministers, Presbyterian ministers, Lutheran ministers, some of these more liberal, progressive churches um, had a very different look at things. I'm not so sure that coming out as gay as a Methodist minister, I don't know when or if that would have been a problem. There are gay ministers, Methodist and otherwise, that I know personally right now. And at some point, you know, is this more about him avoiding it, or was there some likelihood that his Methodist minister friends or community or whoever is responsible for that ordaining would have come after him in some way?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think now definitely probably wouldn't be an issue. I think in the 60s, 70s, 80s when that was happening, it probably was more of a taboo. I don't know, kind of in terms of the denomination at the time,
Mm.
was it an issue or not? I don't have that information, but um, culturally, I think at least in the 60s and 70s, and early, 50s when he was growing up as a kid,
Sure.
40s and 50s, it would have been very taboo to be kind of open about his sexuality in any way. So he probably just got to the point where he was so far in it that he didn't really see any other way out. But that's just speculation on my part.
If I remember right, um, did his wife die after you started and before you could actually interview her for this?
She died in 2022, so I was working on it, and she was still alive. But apparently, from what I heard from people, her mental state was not
Mm.
great at that point. Suffering from some dementia issues, and so even if she had been willing to talk to me, which she probably wouldn't, there wasn't any chance of that happening
Yeah,
anyway.
you'd have at best an unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
Um, Now they remained married, but at some point, well, let me take a step back because before we get to the more difficult
yeah,
allegations, one of the things is that this is somebody who's I bid you peace and is constantly educating and let me tell you about where in the world this food came from or how I found this dish and how you can do it and yet there was also, and I don't think you spent perhaps even enough time on this. There were lots of talk about his alcoholism
mhm,
and, working, uh, evidently sauced all the time and leading to sort of um, emotional and controlling abuse just for the crew, having to work with him and not knowing, oh, are we in this mood now?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of drinking, and again, I think there was probably some genetic component to that. I think his father was a big drinker, but also, as John Evans says in the series, the closet's a very lonely, isolating place and filled with, self-hatred and self-deprecation. And so he kind of dealt with that, self-medicated, as it were,
Mm.
through drinking. And yeah, I mean, there's so many stories of him just being completely wasted and having Elmo on the show and being
Right.
wasted with Elmo and I mean it's just these stories are yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's definitely there's part of me that can certainly feel sympathetic towards somebody. I can't imagine what it's like to be in that position. Um, and then you have to also remember that while something may be understandable, that doesn't necessarily make it excusable because you're still going to be
Mm.
responsible for how you treat people. And of course, that brings us around to the more salacious and sensationalized accusations um, of numerous accounts of um, sexual abuse of men who worked for it.
Yeah, and underage boys who worked
Yeah.
for him. Um, Yeah, and that's the thing as well that is so interesting to me about a topic like this. Because as you know, I'm somebody who really likes talking about questions of morality and talking about questions of how we live our lives and things that are important and all that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. And one thing that I find really interesting about this topic and him in particular is, how do we navigate our relationship with somebody, whether it's a personal relationship or like a fan relationship with somebody who has qualities that we admire, who does bad things.
Yeah.
And we've had this experience in our own kind of atheist community too, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can see situations where people take responsibility or apologize or do X, Y, and Z, and we think about them in a different way than somebody who kind of digs in their heels and doubles down and doesn't take responsibility or doesn't take accountability for how they've hurt other people. And so those kinds of things, how we navigate these, I find really interesting. And that's something in the series I thought was important to shed a light on because you see all these different people navigating that. You have people who say, they hate him now, or or people who say, I was abused by him, but I forgive him, or I just don't think about it anymore, or people who say, I loved him and he never did any of this stuff, and it's all lies, and they wanted money. Like, it spans the gamut of everything, right? And I find that interesting.
Yeah, and by the way, there's we'll get links out so that people can go watch this. And I don't want to spoil everything that's exposed in
Hmm.
here, but I found it really telling that a number of the victims that you interviewed, when I watched it, did not feel at all to me like a typical victim. And we're talking about people who were boys underage at the time, or maybe of age, but we're working for him and viewed him as a mentor. And yeah, there were some who were, of course, I hate him. He absolutely did this and it's awful. And then there were others that were like, yeah, it happened. It's like, I don't know if that was a product of the time or if this was just his charisma and appeal, this guru-like, minister-like um, kind of attraction that he had, and and making use of that to not only keep victims quiet for many, many years, because it was a long time before, we started hearing a parade of accusations, but also to change their perception of what actually happened. Like to me, it looked like some of them, um, if you asked them if they were a victim of sexual abuse, um, while they were underage, I think some of them would say no.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different dynamics in play there. So I think the fact that they're male victims probably plays a part in that as well. Perhaps there's a difference between how many male victims of sexual assault look at the word victim
Mhm.
versus uh, maybe some female victims. I don't know for sure. Um, uh, and also how society looks at men versus women in terms of issues of sexual assault. One of the reporters I spoke to talks about that, where she mentions that one of the parents had known that there were rumors about his interest in boys, but thought, well, my son's a boy, so he can take care of himself.
Mm,
And that you wouldn't have necessarily said that if you'd heard that he liked 15-year-old girls, you wouldn't send your 15-year-old daughter in to work for him. But
right.
boys can take care of themselves, especially in the 70s was more of a common way that people thought about things. Um, I also think that there's an aspect of it too, which is perhaps that it's been so long since these things happened that one of the ways that somebody copes with it is to kind of just not think of it as such a big deal. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put myself in that position, but you're right. It's an interesting way that some people kind of look at it. Um,
Yeah, and it was a good mix. Well, I say a good mix. That's probably not the best way to put this. I mean, we talk about victims, we talk about survivors, Um, and there were some people that you interviewed, who I would definitely say are victims and survivors who either wouldn't necessarily view it that way, or perhaps because we didn't. If anything, there's a few of them that I'd love to have a conversation with because do they think they have healed from this? Because there were people like, oh, I forgive him, or it wasn't that big of a deal. And it reminds me, not to mention he who shall not be named, but when Dawkins talked about being inappropriately touched,
Hmm.
he shrugged it off as, it wasn't that big of a deal. And he kind of got shit for it. And he then responded with, I'm talking about how it felt to me. I'm not saying that's how it felt to anybody else. And while I've got loads of other problems with Richard, um, the notion that the person who experienced it can only relay how they feel about it and how it's impacted them. It was, I think it was probably one of my favorite parts of the documentary was seeing how different people reacted to these scenarios, because I think that some of them, who are definitely survivors, and I don't get to decide whether they're in denial or coping or whatever. I think that if Jeff were still alive and wanted to hang out with them, I think some of them would just say yes. Not others would have been like, hell no, I'm not going anywhere near him.
Yeah.
But that, and we saw that from people who worked for him. There were people who were like, I'll never work for him again. He was a monster. This was absolutely unbearable work circumstances. And then people who seem to just shrug it off as that's the nature of this business, and he's better than some and worse than some. And are we all just so different that we can be in the same scenario and spin it however is most comfortable for us? I mean, there were people who worked side by side who had different views of him. Is the impression I got.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is truly bizarre to me how, and this gets back to your comment about referring to him as a guru and a cult, because I hadn't actually made that connection before, but I think there are definitely parallels to a lot of cult behavior that we've seen in actual cults. It actually reminds me, there was a film that you and I watched together
Hmm?
about a cult in Austin, I believe.
Yes.
And it reminds me, looking back at how some of the victims in that documentary spoke about their experiences with that guru, because I forget the name of it, but maybe you remember. But um,
Holy
I
hell.
remember, what's that?
I think it was Holy Hell
Holy hell. Okay.
about the Buddhafield cult. Yeah.
Yes. And there were people who worked for him who kind of steadfastly denied that anything had happened, and then would go in and be sexually assaulted by him. I mean,
Yes.
it was astonishing. So yeah, it reminds me a lot of that and other kind of cult of personality behavior, because he really was, I think, so charismatic that people were just drawn to him, and he was able to spin that. And you see that in how people, even his friends, John Evans, people speak out about him now, because if they do have kind of a moral um, question about their relationship with him, it's tough, and you get to see them kind of go back and forth about he did these bad things, but also he was my friend, but also he victimized people, and how do I square that? And it's so interesting seeing how different people approach that same person. You know,
Well, that brings us to not only are people going to be different in how they respond to things, with regard to him, but there are some people that aren't in the film who have been responding to the film, and some of you get the normal things of, oh, I enjoyed this documentary, and then you get the oh, I didn't know that and I remember that and this was really interesting. And then you get to the people whose response to this is either, oh my God, thank you for doing this, I had some interaction with this monster,
mhm.
or go to hell, Chris. This guy was my hero, and this is all lies, and this is people, looking for money. And to be fair, one of the first or most significant reporters of being a victim of abuse, there's some doubt about that individual's motives because of money related to a settlement.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's one of the things that's so tricky about this whole situation. It's not cut and dry. It's not one way or the other. It is so multifaceted because you're right. There was, this one guy who was, as one of the journalists put it in the series, a bit of a grifter. And but he had his hands on this truth, as she puts it, right? So he he had this truth about what happened, but because he wasn't getting people to listen to him, he would push in different ways or stretch the truth or things like that, and then people would just dismiss him as just being a fraud or a kind of a con man. So it's a very kind of muddied situation in certain respects. But it does amaze me, like we said before, that there are people who can sit with a straight face and say he never did anything wrong ever and he was an amazing person. Because, like, hello. I mean, like when the priest talks about that in the series, it's like, what planet are you living on?
Yeah. I have a I have someone who's, I'll say, a friendly acquaintance.
Hmm.
And many years ago, a mutual friend of ours warned me about this person, and they said, don't trust them. They're a psychopath, they're a sociopath, they did all the armchair diagnosis. They're absolutely awful, and they're going to lie to you, and they're going to say one thing to your face and something else to you behind your back. Um, and I'm still friends with the person in question, or still acquainted with the person in question, and I have not seen any evidence that the warning was warranted. But what it did was it set me on guard to make sure that I'm paying attention to stuff, so that I'm always just a little extra guarded around that person. And yet this has been probably 15, 16 years ago that they warned me, and I keep interacting, and I don't see anything genuinely but good. And yet I have no way to respond to this other person's claims about their interactions with him. And that's where I was kind of leading to, is that in the responses to the film, um, it's been wild. I've watched you post some of them, and somebody, you get the whiny, why isn't this free? Why would I have to pay for 5 episodes? Whatever. I
Right.
don't know, because maybe people deserve to be paid for the work they do. But there were some people who are really mad and are incredibly defensive. And I wonder how close those people were, or is this like, are these just, you know, fanboys that are like, no, this person meant so much. I never met him, but he meant so much to me. I just won't believe it. Or if these are people who met him and are, pissed because you're potentially tarnishing the reputation all over again. There were people like, all these allegations came out years ago. Why are you doing this now? Why wouldn't you?
Right. Right. And I've gotten emails from people who were victimized by him saying, "Thank you so much for doing this. This has really helped heal me." Um, which I'm surprised that somebody who was victimized by Jeff would be able to get through all 5 episodes, because it's pretty heavy in there.
Yeah.
So that takes a lot of courage, I think, to be able to do that. But yeah, it is surprising just the number of people who, and we talked about this before, right? Like people who will defend somebody they've never met, saying, these accusations, he couldn't possibly have done this. Well, how do you know? I mean, like, I would never say that someone I never met is incapable of doing anything, because I have no idea.
I'm not even sure I can say it about people I know pretty well. I mean, I have been, you and I have been in the secular movement for many, many years.
Yeah.
I have been surprised and shocked and appalled at the number of times I have, and I'm not the worst judge of character, I don't think. I think I'm pretty good. There are some people I sussed out pretty quickly, and there were other people that bamboozled me for years and in
Mm,
some cases were just absolute frauds. Um, it's one thing to, like work with somebody and then as the cultural conversation changes, you find out something new about them that wasn't addressed before.
mhm.
But it's something else to find out that somebody has been like fully duplicitous and a hidden monster showing that dark face to others while hiding it to you because they're so good at they recognize, oh, well, you got a show that I want to be on, so I'm going to be this way to you. And then I'm just going to be, I've been shocked at the number of people who have, like, there was at least one person who I called one of my best friends, um, who I won't ever speak to again. And it puts me in this position where it's like,
Mm.
I can't ever say I know anybody well enough to make that kind of declarative about them. I mean, I'd like to. I'd like
Yeah.
to think I know you well enough. I'd like to think I know Arden well enough. I'd like to think, some of my close friends aren't frauds, uh, but I've been wrong before.
Have you
And
seen people handle that well? I mean, like we talked about before about people handling those accusations in I don't want to say a good way, but a responsible way. Have you seen that as well, or is it mostly like deflection and doubling down?
um, the one that was the biggest deal went into a manipulative spiral after I cut them off. And all it did was absolutely reaffirm that I had done the right thing. And it showed several other people um, that this person wasn't who they thought they were. In any
Hmm.
case, uh, I was very fortunate this past weekend to spend a little time at South by Southwest, which is a film festival here in Austin. It's a lot more than a film festival, but it is a film festival. A good friend of mine had platinum passes and dumped uh, her fraudulent boyfriend and messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Austin for South by." And I've lived here since like 95 and I never go into town for South. I avoid it like the plague. It's the worst traffic, it's high prices. And as much as I like films and wouldn't mind seeing previews, it's just never been worth it. But uh, when she first reached out, I thought she was just asking me to go to this Stacey Abrams talk and not to go to all of South by. And then it turns out, no, no, she got a platinum pass for me. Long story short, there were a number of reserved seats that were originally on the Platinum Pass that were wiped when it was transferred to my name. So I did not get to see the Bigfoot documentary that everybody's talking about, although I heard really good things about it. It's from the guys that actually perpetrated the hoax and recorded that original film, coming clean with some extra footage and other stuff is really good. I did get to see the premiere of I Love Boosters, uh, which is wild and weird. There were some audio issues in the theater. And then I went to the animated short. Um, um, it was like an hour and a half of animated shorts. It was like five or six of them. Uh, and they were outstanding and it's good stuff. And the documentary that we talked about before, Holy Hell, that actually premiered at Sundance. When you're doing a project like this, um, the first documentary that you did that we know each other from because I'm in it. But it fits where you could screen it at a something like Sundance or South by. This
Right.
does not. And
Right.
so when you're putting together, a 5-part series, um, what are your options for getting something of this scope in front of people to review the quality of the work, the cinematography, the direction, the art, all that. Do you have options for that? Can you submit portions of it to film festivals?
Some film festivals do take episodic content. Most don't. So yeah, um, it is harder when you're making something kind of bigger and more in depth like that. And interestingly, it was initially going to be a feature, just a feature length, hour and 45. And as I was working on it, as I was editing, I couldn't, I couldn't cut stuff. And then I got another editor on board, a guy, a really great editor, a guy who edited the Netflix series Cheer.
Mm.
And so he took a look at it, and we worked together on editing. And he was actually the one who suggested, if you thought about making this episodic instead of a single film. So that's why it is an episodic series. Although I will say, one thing I'm doing right now, and I haven't told this publicly yet, is I'm actually creating a version which is a feature length film. So people will have the option to either, if they want the deep dive and they want all the extra anecdotes and stories and all that and detailed information, there's still the 5 episodes you can watch. Or if you want the story told, in kind of one sitting, there's going to be that option available as well.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm glad to hear that. I enjoyed watching it. I learned a lot. Um, when the kind of more feature length one comes out, I will almost certainly sit down and maybe Art and I will watch that, despite the fact that I've seen, I'm assuming all or nearly all of it.
Right.
Uh, but it was going through 5 episodes. It felt very much like, ooh, why didn't Netflix jump on this like they did for Tiger King and other stuff like that? And it's part of it is when I watch the reactions of the people, they're all over the map, and I'm like, isn't that exactly what you want in this? Sorry, and I'm not at all trying to insult your work, but in this clickbait, give me some drama, give me some conflict world where I loved him, I hated him, isn't that exactly what should be drawing more people in? And so I think maybe Arden's got a picture of the website to potentially direct people through, because while you have the poster behind you, uh, we can't quite see it all with both of us on
Oh,
screen.
that's right. It is behind me. Um, yeah, yeah. The reason, I did try to go through traditional distribution, so finding a distributor to have it be on Netflix or HBO or Hulu or whatever. Um, and no one was interested in the story, and it was before it had been completed all the way. So what they were getting was kind of a demo and a pitch deck and things like that of like this is the project, this is kind of the story arc, that kind of a thing. And the feedback that I got from pretty much every distributor was they felt that Jeff and the story was just not well known enough anymore to be
Mm.
relevant.
You can't go back to somebody who did a show from like what, 84 to 92, 93, something
90,
like that.
yeah, right. Which I guess makes me feel old, but um, but it's interesting that I see parallels happening again and again. I mean, just was it yesterday? The Cesar Chavez
Yes.
expose in the New York Times came out, and it was like, like it's a story that keeps on happening again and again.
He's the newest example um of what we were talking about earlier, where how do you deal with finding out somebody who's done good things and things you like, whether it's, hey, here's a rock musician that also assaulted underage women, yet the songs were good. Here's a filmmaker, not everything Harvey Weinstein produced was awful. There's stuff in there that you like. And
Yeah,
um Rebecca Watson just did a thing the other day about how Hugh Jackman is part of a shitty cult that is misogynistic and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, how much of that spills over to him and what he's done that I like, and a character. And I mean, we all know, none of us are perfect, but generally speaking, I don't know too many people um whose awfulness is worthy of a documentary. And I think that fundamentally changes it. If you are so bad in some respect that it's worth doing a documentary about you, maybe that outweighs some of the good you did. I mean, I'm sure
right,
Hitler loved his mom, but
right, yeah. Um, Yeah, and it's interesting, the levels of severity. We all make mistakes. We all do things that are not great at times in our lives. And so, but you're right. I mean, if you've done so much that there's, 4.5 hours of content about how awful you were, I mean, that's got to say something. It's funny, by the way, you mentioned Harvey Weinstein because just right before the pandemic, so January of 2020, I was in New York and I got called for jury duty. And this is right after I kind of started working on this project. And I went in, and the jury selection room was huge, and it was just full of people. And I thought, wow, they called a lot of us today. And we went into the courtroom, and the trial we were potential jurors for was the case of Harvey Weinstein.
No way.
And Harvey Weinstein's sitting like 20 feet away from me, and I'm filling out my jury form about potentially being a juror in this case, and I realized, oh right, I'm working on this project now about sexual assault. I should write about this in my jury selection form. So I did that, and I recused myself from jury selection because I'm doing this. So
I've
yeah,
only
and
been
then
called
COVID.
for jury duty once. And the lesson I learned was don't ask any questions if you actually want to get on the jury. Because I wanted to be on the jury
Hmm.
and they said something, and I asked a clarifying question. Um, that is the same sort of thing that would pop in my head if I was on the show and somebody made a claim. I would ask a clarifying question, and I was dismissed almost immediately. It seems neither side was very interested in having anybody who would actually listen and think and reason. Uh, it seems like they're often keen on getting the reaction. Like we
Hmm.
want, the defense wants someone whose gut is I can empathize with the defendant, and the prosecution wants someone whose gut is I can empathize with, the wronged party or the state or somebody similar to the defendant did something wrong to me once, and so yeah, it's really strange.
Maybe it's
Right.
a bad way to go about doing things. I mean, the more I learn about it, the more I realize like, this isn't a really good system.
We've got a couple callers lined up, and I'm going to get to calls in just a second, but I briefly want to mention um, the the first documentary that I know you from, which
Yes.
you can go to atheistbook.com and find out more of it. And the documentary's still watchable, right? From there?
Yeah, I actually put it on YouTube for free so people can
Nice.
watch it. Yeah, it's been
So that
over 10 years. So
I still have multiple copies of the book and the documentary. You interviewed a bunch of atheists about meaning and purpose in a life where they don't believe there's a God.
mhm.
Through that, without rehashing the entirety of the documentary, because I want to get to callers,
Yeah.
what was most surprising, or did your view about meaning and purpose change dramatically or subtly while you were interviewing people and getting different answers?
I wouldn't say it changed dramatically because I've pretty much always been an atheist, so I didn't really have any kind of whatever an opposite of a come to God moment would be.
Mm.
But I think it definitely, speaking to all these people, really did put into perspective, um, how short life is and how if you want to do things, you have to take risks. And, for me, being an independent filmmaker and independent artist is risky. It's not always the most kind of financially lucrative job opportunity in the world. Kind of going about things, doing things on your own, as you know, is risky. But I think the reward and the flexibility and the ability to spend time doing things that you really enjoy and digging into stories and speaking to people and learning more about the world. I mean, for me, that's what it's all about. So I think you and I share that quite a bit. So yeah.
Yes, we do. I tell you what, we got callers lined up here, and right off the bat, we got Maureen. Brennan Shearer. Maureen's calling in from Canada, the most wonderful place on the planet. Sometimes. Hey, Maureen, how are you? And what have you got for Chris?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Chris. Um, I'm listening to you guys here. A few things have gone through my mind as how victims react to the abuse. And a few
Yes.
things that I know affected me was the age. I think when you're a teenager, it's different than when well, it's the way I handle it at that age. Also, the fact that it's a family member or somebody you know instead of a stranger danger. And also the fact that religion made me feel at the very beginning when I realized what was going on, that I was part of a sin instead of the victim. And that I directly think had to do with my Catholic upbringing, telling me that, well, you were part of a sin. And then later on in life, of course, you realize, no, I didn't have anything to do with it. It didn't matter that I was 14 and I knew things and should have known better. That's not the way it worked. But religion was actually no help to me back then. And you know what? I don't know what else to say about it, but yeah, religion has a lot to answer for. Not very helpful to victims, I think.
Thank you for sharing. It reminds me what you said a little bit about that. One of the reporters that I interviewed for the series talks about how um, when often when teenagers or young people are victimized, the uh, the perpetrator wants you to feel good and wants you to feel not necessarily uncomfortable because it implicates you, because like you said, you're a part of it now. So as she put it to me, well, if it felt good or if I had an orgasm, I'm implicated. And so
Right.
now I can't tell, even more because you have that sense of shame and culpability that you put on you, by often by the religion.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
it doesn't help at all through religion. It makes you feel worse, and it took years and years. I mean, I just became an atheist a few years ago, um, and the line has helped me with that. And the more I got away from religion, the more I realized it just what a hold it has on you, and how destructive it can be. I mean, I never really saw it that way before. But now, yeah, I do. And of course, I'm talking about this is years ago. I'm 70 now. It did take a long time. I have to say, my relationship with the abuser is fine. It's somebody in my family. I've dealt with it. I do not discuss this with him. I do not even discuss it with my family. I'm surprised I'm discussing this with you people. Uh,
yeah.
but I found that this community is very supportive of whatever you say. And it is helpful to talk about it. Um, but yeah, I don't think I'd be a person even today that would out this person because of my relationship with his family. And yeah, it's difficult to deal with, but I found a way to deal with it. And I don't hate this person. I see that this person grew up in a awful place. I'm not forgiving them for it. It's more of trying to forget it. But there was a long period of time in my youth where I just ignored it. And I think a lot of people do that. They try to ignore it. And I find people just don't understand that you can have any kind of relationship with somebody who was an abuser. But yeah, that's what happened with me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, Maureen. And I, yeah, thank you. I don't know that I could do that. I'm going to share a little story after this, but thank you so much for calling in and addressing that, because getting multiple perspectives from people who've been through this is incredibly valuable. It might also almost be worth uh, setting aside Jeff Smith and just doing a documentary on abuse survivors, and how they've coped with it, um, especially in this era where we're going to be dealing with Epstein survivors, where we're going to have, church clergy scandal survivors as well. But
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I handle it the way I did is because you're not really sure how people are going to be receptive. like you just see the people around the Epstein files denying everything and pretending that these men did nothing wrong, even trying to make excuses for them. And that's part of the reason why a lot of people just shut up and don't say anything, because you don't know how you're going to be, people are going to treat you anyway. I'm glad you had this show, and I'm, like I said, surprised I called in. But yeah, thanks a lot for having this show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maureen.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
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 I never suffered any sexual abuse by anybody at any church that I went to, but as it turns out, it may just be that I'm not the type of person, or wasn't the type of person, that was likely to be targeted by someone like that, because I have learned that, in fact, there was a church official at the church that we went to who sexually assaulted a number of teenage boys. And I've been pissed about this for many years, because I knew this person and I knew the individuals, and yet I knew nothing about what was going on at the time. And having talked to at least one of the survivors, the fact that it felt good was just stuck in their head to make them feel like, oh, I must be involved in this. This had to be, and for years of, oh, this person, manipulated my genitals and it felt good. And it'd be good for people to realize, yeah, it can feel good. I mean, that's kind of the way we work normally, is to try to make it feel good. And so that's completely independent from the abuse. And when the allegations came to light, the abuser got a stern talking to by some people in the church and promised to change his ways and everything else. And that was it. No legal action was ever taken against this person. And I will be pissed until the day I die that this person isn't rotting in a prison for what he did to my friends. And yet I also recognize I'm not one of the survivors. It's not my story, which is why I'm not going to give anybody any information. And you don't get to make the survivors into victims again in order that you get to feel a sense of justice. And it took a while for me to come to grips with the fact that, because I'm somebody that really, really, really wants to see justice. There's a number of people in the atheist community that I can't wait for them to get theirs. There's a number of people I know who are in the Epstein files who I can't wait for them to get theirs. There are people in the government, in the administration, all the way up to the head motherfucker in charge. I cannot wait for them to get theirs. And I will go to my grave knowing that I knew someone. I was at this person's home. I interacted with them and their family repeatedly. And I knew the people, the victims that he abused, and nothing is ever going to happen. It's a lot to take in, but I don't get to cry about it because I'm not the one that was abused. And I don't get to tell somebody else's story. And that's why it was so interesting for me to watch these guys who would flat out tell, kind of. I mean, they didn't go into a lot of details. They would be like, oh, he put his hand on this, or he did this, or he approached me after a shift, or we did this. And it was not, you did a great job of not making it overly salacious, but listening to them talk about it, it had the ring of truth. You could see they were trying to tell the story in a way that that they could. Like if they had to tell more details or they had to tell it different, I think we might have seen a different reaction from some of them. And yet others, whether it was, as we mentioned before, whether it was because they have healed some, or because they genuinely don't view it as abuse, it was just like hey, it was almost like the boys will be boys thing.
Mm-hmm. It is so interesting, and you really hit the nail on the head there, because it is so complicated and so complex. And I don't mean that in a, oh, it's a we don't know what happened kind of thing. We know what happened, but the complexity is kind of in our reactions and how we think about things and how we think about what does justice look like? What does taking accountability look like? What, can somebody do enough to where they can kind of regain a life they had? I mean, we talk about restorative justice and we talk about what is the point of the prison system? Is it just to punish people or is it to rehabilitate people? It even goes, as far as conversations about free will and accountability and responsibility of what our actions are. I mean, there's so many layers to this conversation, which is what I find so interesting about it. Because it's not a cut and dry thing. It's not what many religions would say as like a, cut and dry, fire and brimstone kind of eye for an eye kind of thing. There is much more nuance in that conversation about what are the responsibilities of somebody who has been accused of something to make amends? And how is there a way where somebody can take responsibility and re-enter society? Or are there crimes that are so heinous that they should be removed from society forever, never forgiven? Or if somebody does decide to forgive them, is that, if a victim decides to forgive, that's up to them? Or, you know what I mean? There's so much going on there.
We've also, and we're going to take another call here in just a minute. If you're a theist or an atheist and you have thoughts about either the documentary I Bid You Peace, about Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet, and the accusations about his character and his sexual abuse of boys, by all means, call in. We're also taking other callers expressing their thoughts on similar issues, but also if you have thoughts on meaning and purpose in life, getting back to Chris's earlier documentary, from either a theist or atheist perspective, we'll happily take that. We got a couple calls, but I want to make one point, which is another thing that's constantly irritated me. It's one thing to have like your therapist is not allowed to disclose information about you, except in certain circumstances where there's a clear risk that you are going to harm yourself or others. And we extend that without any warrant at all other than tradition to the seal of confession. And so the church can get you to tell your deepest, darkest secrets, use them or not use them however they want, and cannot be compelled to tattle. And in many cases, this is not only, it's disgusting how some of these things are actually used, but the churches would just shuffle the perpetrators around from one church to another church to another church, and nobody ever knew. I mean, you don't end up on a sexual on a registry for sex offenders. You just, oh, the church has got your dirty little secrets. And as we start seeing the dirty little secrets come out from the Epstein files, as we start seeing the dirty little secrets of the billionaire class and the elite, and the absolute, like, I'm hearing stuff that now seems plausible that 10 years ago, if somebody told me, I would have been like, you're a nut job. You're buying into bullshit conspiracy theories. They're not engaged in cannibalism, and yet they may be. It is absolutely wild. And so we've extended this privilege to the church, and I think it's been responsible not just for the corruption, but the extension of abuse and victimhood, but also adding power to the church in the same way that, if somebody's got dirt on you and they can blackmail you into, I don't know, starting a war with Iran or supporting their genocide in Gaza, they can also probably use that to control who you donate to, who you vote for, what kind of legislation you're going to enact, what files you're going to release or redact. And it's not just the billionaires. Let's see, I wanted to go with alliteration and go with bullshit artists, but I'll just go with clergy. Billionaires and clergy are running the world in a way that just lays waste to my brain when I think of the gravity and the impact of it.
It's even, just touching on that as well. It's interesting to me that probably the worst label you can have in society right now is a child molester. I mean, all the people who joke about, being sexually assaulted in prison, they reserve that for child abusers. Being called a pedophile is the worst thing you could ever be called. People routinely want to lock child abusers up for life, right? So it's interesting that when you have potential information about, abuse of children, that people want to cover that up. Given that that's the worst thing you can be in our society is a child abuser.
One quick clarification, and then we'll go on to calls. I haven't been able to follow much in chat, but evidently when I said I don't get to cry about it because I'm not one of the victims, there's some people that might not have understood what I meant. I have cried about it. Absolutely. What I'm saying is I don't get to prop myself up as if I'm also a victim. I don't get to act as if I'm the directly wronged party, even though I would fully say we're all the wronged parties because these are people we love and care about. And yeah, that's all I meant. By all means. By the way, after I had open heart surgery, one of the first things they told me is you're going to find that you cry more. And I was like, really? That's weird. And we still don't know why, but it's absolutely true. I'll cry at all kinds of stuff now. So yes, cry your eyes out, but when you're done crying, let's help people get better and move on past things and fix the world so that it doesn't keep happening over and over again. Couple of callers here. Rainwood is calling from New York. Rainwood's an agnostic pronoun him that has a comment about how religion shaped his life in a negative way. How are you, Rainwood?
Hi, Matt. I promise I won't take up too much of your time. I know I'm changing the subject a little bit, but yeah, I started watching The Line about a year ago, and Matt, it was a process. I had to fight you. I had to fight Auden. I had to fight all the people on the line, Forrest and Erica, to come to realize that I've been living a lie. It really, and I think I know why people do it. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and anyone that knows anything about that particular religion, they strip you of everything. Birthdays, holidays. I ate Chinese food in my car on Christmas Eve by myself because I didn't celebrate. And then you realize that what would I have been if I was just living my life just knowing that we don't know. We don't know. And I had to listen to you over and over and over again, Matt, to realize that my logic was out the window. I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove it. And so I'm as much calling for myself as I am for anybody else out there that thinks that thinks they know something that we can't know. We can't know there's a God. There's no way to prove it.
Well,
and that's why I'm calling myself an agnostic. I'm sorry, Matt.
No, well, I appreciate you calling and the fact that you made progress. I wouldn't be me if I didn't caution you on claiming that you can't know something, because I'm not convinced that you have any justification to say that something cannot be known. Maybe just that right now, neither you nor me or somebody else can actually think of a way that it could be known or verifiable. So I just say,
Yes.
it starts when people start saying you can't know, there's no way to know, there's no way to prove, and all this other stuff. It starts to sound very closed-minded, and
Right.
I just want to caution against that because that's similarly not skepticism.
Yeah. I'll just say one or two other things, and I'll let you get on. I really appreciate you guys so much, and I continue to listen to you over and over and over again. And I said, this man is logically making sense, and I'm fighting it. Why am I fighting it? It takes courage, and maybe you won't give up on some of the people that are calling in that are trying to defend their religion because they're afraid. They're scared, and I think that's part of it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But real quick, I'll tell you, when I was 28 years old, I got proposed for signing a musical contract for a 20-city tour. And when the witnesses found out, they hauled me into a committee and they said they were going to disfellowship me, and I was shaking. Please, no, I can't get thrown out of the Kingdom Hall. I'll lose everlasting life. And they said, well, you could be a songwriter, but you can't be a frontman artist. And so I became a back musician, just writing music for other people. And I woke up one day not too long ago, and I said to myself, what could I have been? What could I have shared with other people?
Yeah.
How could I have maybe help the human race a little bit more? And then I really want to thank you for not giving up, for staying the course and helping other people. You are helping other people. You really are. You're making a difference, Matt, and Auden too, and Jimmy and the whole crew.
Well, thank you very much for saying so. I appreciate it. Keep going.
And the
Keep
last thing
making
I'm going to
progress.
say is Shannon is my hero because she's so brave.
Shannon is among my heroes, but don't tell her. Rainwood, thanks so much for calling.
Right.
Keep going. Keep asking questions. Keep an open mind, and we'll talk to you another time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
That thought about how could my life be different and what could I have done to make the world better if it hadn't been for the things that happened to me. There's another aspect to that I've had this conversation several times. It's kind of like, if you're tired of having the transporter arguments or, all the other stuff, what if there's something that you would be the absolute best in the world at, but you'll never know because you were led away from even exploring an interest in that thing? What could have been, there, but for the grace of God go I. It comes up a lot when we're talking about. I remember when Netflix, Queen's Gambit, and we were talking a lot about the disparity between men and women in chess. And you have, the greatest woman who's ever played chess is Judith Polgar, who now has a documentary out about her, which I have not had a chance to watch yet, but I'm looking forward to it. She's still alive. I have not had the chance to meet her, but I have had the chance to watch her play some amazing games, including against the greatest player who I think has ever lived, and that's Magnus Carlsen. And it's like, oh, is there some grand difference between men and women in the brain department that, makes men better at chess? Or is it that we just didn't encourage women to play? Because it doesn't seem to be a good reason. And that prompts those discussions of what might I have loved to have done, and maybe not even be the world's best at, but like, I've tried a number of different crafts. I love a lot of crafts. I know kind of the extent of how good I could be at stuff, but maybe with one slight tweak, I might have been the greatest kazoo player of all time. Who knows? And are we letting, religions limit us? And I'm with Rain in the sense that Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the more limiting religions out there. Obviously, they're way more limiting than Methodist or Lutheran or Presbyterian. And it's not just about blood transfusions. It's not just about holidays. It's about the human condition and the psychology and what you're encouraged to even pursue or think about. And from my standpoint, as somebody who was raised as Southern Baptist in a strongly evangelical sense, it was pray without ceasing. It was, if you are thinking about anything other than doing what God needs you to do, you are failing in some way and you need to get back on track. Did you see in talking to Jeff or talking to friends and people who worked with Jeff, he always struck me as a sort of curious, let me find out about stuff. And as a minister, I don't feel that I would have connected with him as a minister at all. Like, I think our views on ministry and religion were vastly different. Did you get the impression that, I don't know, we talked about it at the beginning, is he an intellectual chef guru who had a minister costume? Or what was the actual significance of the religion? Was it about the religion or was it about like community?
I think it was about both. I think that he definitely was curious and interested in culture and anthropology and food and history and all of that. But I think he also, he looked at all that through the lens of religion and specifically the Methodist religion that he grew up with and was kind of a part of. And was probably a way that that's kind of how he found he could interact with the world, was through that kind of Methodist minister lens, which he then just wore for the rest of his life. And, one of the people I spoke to talked about this in the series, which is, just imagine like what he could have done had he not had all of the bad kind of elements that he had, right? What he could have done. And, we look at other chefs who've withstood that. Julia Child, you mentioned earlier, these people from that era who were able to maintain a legacy that you would want. You'd want to have movies made about you that are like Julie and Julia, or, and that was that was an option that he had, but he just threw it all away based on, these other issues.
We got a couple more calls to get to. As a reminder, this is a special show. This is an episode of Hostility. It's one of the many shows that we have here on the Line Network, and they are all call-in networks. I have my own show on Wednesdays called The Hang Up. On Thursdays is the Transatlantic Call-In Show, and you can interact with real live trans folks that'll help you understand the things about trans rights and how to be an ally and how to not be a transphobe that you I don't know, you may be curious about. Upcoming, so next Wednesday on the Hang Up, I'll be back with Justin on Transatlantic Call-In Show. Next Thursday at 2 p.m. Central will be Ben and Riverboat Jack. And on the Sunday show, Seth Andrews and I will be on at 1, and the Sunday show after dark will be Forrest and Owen. Monday's episode of Skeptalk, which starts at 6 p.m., is John Gleason and Justin. And Chewed Gum, we'll have Alyssa and Taylor on next Tuesday, talking about sex, sexuality from a women's perspective and what purity culture does to inhibit as well. So we're covering a lot of ground here. I couldn't be more excited to have Chris on today to talk about Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet, and the documentary that he's done, I Bid You Peace. We have a couple callers that we're going to try to get to right now. One of them is from someone named Darsh, pronouns are he, him, in Pennsylvania, and it's going back essentially to meaning and purpose. So, hey, Darsh, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
My question was that I noticed that a lot of people who I've met, they have like one of two answers to what the meaning of life is, if they're asked about it. One of those answers is just, for me, the meaning of life is in sort of simple pleasures like eating a sandwich, drinking tea, going out into the sun, having a nice walk, that kind of thing. And the other answer is like more about, I would say, curiosity, like learning more about the world and trying to sort of figure out what your place is in it and how you can help other people in it. And I was wondering if you thought that was like a fair assessment of humanity, sort of like how we find meaning in our lives. Would you say that that's at all accurate?
Well, I think Chris is probably the better person to give the answer because he got those thoughts from so many different people. Do you think that's kind of like a fairly accurate breakdown of the spectrum of answers you got for what people's meaning and purpose was without a God?
I think that's fairly accurate. I think it's a combination of small things and big things, right? So finding something that is bigger than you that you can be a part of to help other people. I think a lot of folks get a lot of meaning from that. And also the small moments, like you said, eating a sandwich, going out to the sunshine, those things are really important too. Julia Sweeney told me one of the things that really helps her is kind of meditating on the happiest moments in your life. It was an idea she got from Epicurus, and Greek philosophy was just kind of sitting and meditating and thinking about those specific moments that made you happy, and how can you have more of those, and how can you kind of cherish those memories and make more memories, and just trying to make the world a better place. For me, one memory that I have in particular, Matt and I were in a diner in New York. Somebody notices Matt from outside, runs inside the diner, and proceeds to tell Matt how much Matt had changed his life because of the work that he's done. And, how amazing is that to be able to say that you've changed people's lives and people really appreciate the work you do. So
it doesn't
okay.
suck, but it does feel very weird. We were out the other day, and I don't know, I can't even remember where we were. Oh, we were at the Ren Fair. And somebody walked by and heard me talking and recognized my voice. And it's like the second or third time, because there's so many people who would listen just on podcasts. I was at a rest area in Illinois with Beth one time, and we walked in, and Beth and I were just talking, and this dude kind of reacted a little bit and stood outside and waited until we had finished using the restroom to be like, I think I recognize your voice. And are you? And I was like, yeah. And, I mean, I greatly appreciate being appreciated, but for me, I highly recommend going to watch Chris's documentary about this. Because I remember my thoughts on this, which stay the same, that, life is its own reward. And that if in any other context, if somebody said your meaning and purpose in life, your job, what you're going to do, what you're going to value is all going to be externally dictated by the government or your parents, we would revolt against that. And yet somehow when we put it in the context of a God, all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, I really hope there's a God out there with a plan for me. Fuck that. I don't need a God with a plan for me. I want to either be able to have my own plan or just be planless and just explore. I want to learn things. I want to find out how things work. And I want to see if I can use that to not just help myself, but to help other people as well. And if I can, great. And if I can't, keep trying.
Yep.
Yeah. Those are some pretty great answers. I think, Chris, what you've taught me just now is that these ideas of like getting pleasure in the moment, and the idea of like trying to become a better person, let's say, like they're not as disparate and disconnected in reality as I thought that they were in my mind. Because you were saying, both of you were recounting instances where you've had an influence on people, and people have responded positively to those influences. They said that you've helped them quite a bit in their lives, and I guess I didn't really consider that until now. That you could like have that kind of influence on someone's life, and that could in turn have a positive influence on your life, and it's like this reciprocal thing.
It could, but I'll tell you this. When Chris started telling that story, I don't really remember it. When he tells the story, it reminds me, and I kind of remember it happening. But what I remember from that trip is that I got into New York and I got a text from Chris to say, essentially, what time do you land? Do you want to go see Book of Mormon tonight? Are you going to have time? And then Chris got tickets for me to go see Book of Mormon on Broadway, where I'm in the front row. And it was a kind of a favor / sacrifice he made, because I'm in the front row, can look down into the orchestra pit, have the little Mormon missionaries, 5 feet away, pretty much singing down at me. And Chris is up in a booth of this. So I didn't even get to sit next to him, but I'd look up every now and then. And then we went out to dinner. I remember that much more vividly than the fact that somebody came in and thanked me. Don't get me wrong. I am grateful that somebody appreciated what I did, but the fact that my friend thought enough to, spend time and do something fun, that sticks in my head much more than somebody thanking me for saying something.
Right, I see. So it's more about like close, or at least closer personal relationships.
Yeah, I like. It's difficult to avoid living in the past, and I work really hard to make sure I don't. And Arden will tell you, the number of things that I forget, whether it's convenience or self-defense or whatever, like there'll be somebody who wronged me, and I'll just remember, the only thing I remember is a rough thing about their identity, and they're now on the bad list, and I won't remember any of the stuff about them. There are some exceptions. There are a couple people I can tell you every fucking word they said, but by and large, I want to get on. I want to keep doing stuff. I want to keep learning stuff. I want to keep helping people. That's my meaning. That's where I get my meaning, and that's my purpose in life, which, as far as I can tell, is self-derived. And if somebody else has a purpose for my life, cool. I hope they're happy with what I'm doing, because I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But hopefully that was helpful, Darsh.
And find something that makes you happy. Explore and find things that you like, and whether it's something that nobody else is interested in, if it makes you happy, it makes you happy.
Yeah, that was helpful, and you both answered the question that I posed at the beginning very well, I would say. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. So
awesome.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Darsh. I appreciate it. Take care. I remember stopping to get cheesecake. I remember, so I remember both the little diner and then the big diner.
Right, cheesecake.
But also,
cheesecake was so good.
Oh yeah, I mean, the only cheesecake I've ever had that came closer, might have been better, was the one from Carnegie Deli, which is a good competitor. And I've only been to New York City a couple of times. And so, hi Eli, I miss you too, man. But all right, here we go. Chris is calling from the UK. Chris is an agnostic, pronouns are him, and says the meaning of life is to fart in a spacesuit. So, hey, Chris, tell us what's going on. Oh, you're calling in from the web. So if you're on your phone calling from the web, you're going to want to tap your phone to wake your phone up, and then you're going to tap the browser to wake the browser up because they tend to go to sleep with the web client.
Right, I think I did that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, cheers. I hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right,
Yep.
all right, cool guys. Okay, first of all, I want to apologise for the last phone call that I made. Yeah, I think I come across a bit.
Well, let's just avoid it.
About
I just got
Barclay.
done saying I don't want to live in the past. So let's just forget it and get on to today.
Okay, I like it. I like your theory. Okay, so do you have a theory of life?
A theory of life? What do you mean?
Well, my theory of life is to fart in a spacesuit, like you've said. And the way I think about that is that, you know, everything that happens in your life leads up to a particular moment. And then if the human race actually dissolves itself, and if there's nothing left of the human race apart from space cadets, then all there's going to be is people floating around in space, farting in their own spacesuits. So that is why I think the theory of life is that.
Okay. I guess
do
I
you
don't know
have
what I guess I don't know what theory of life means, because it sounds like you're expecting, is that the goal? Is that what we're striving towards? Is that just the next thing? What comes after that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I don't necessarily know what theory of life means, but you're saying this is something that we're moving towards. Is that like a final goal, or is there something that comes after farting in a spacesuit?
Okay, it's not really a goal at all. It's just the way I think the world is going. It's not where I'm aiming towards at all.
Okay. I guess I just don't understand what a theory of life is, or, no offense, what
Who does?
value it is. I mean, it's like saying, hey, we're all moving towards the grave. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I'm not as convinced we're all moving towards farting in a spacesuit. But
Okay, yeah, I can totally understand it. You know, I have the utmost of respect for anybody else's belief. You know, I
don't.
do respect other
don't.
people's beliefs.
I don't.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
You don't?
I don't have respect for other people's beliefs necessarily. As a matter of fact, I find the statement that you have the utmost respect for everybody's beliefs to be a position I can't possibly respect. Do you respect racist beliefs?
Now, that is a very interesting question. You've just said to me that you don't respect my belief. Now,
Correct.
all I can say to you is, Philip Barberio, olive oil, Philip Barberio, olive oil.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Hey, Chris. Did that feel good?
Hi. Yeah, it did. I had to get that one out.
Cool. Say goodbye. Oh, you don't get to say goodbye because I already hung up on you. How strange.
That was weird.
You know, it's I will say that despite the fact that, and that's a lot of effort to put into, to just kind of scream something nonsensical into, a phone. I still don't know what a theory of life is, but I would say that this notion that we're moving towards, I don't know, maybe living in space in some way, maybe as a bit of poetry, you could talk that we're, instead of just going towards the grave, humanity is rapidly approaching, smelling their own farts and in spacesuits as we. Yeah, I'm in spite of all of it, I'm still trying to make sense of what it said when I should probably just say this is an absurdist prank call that is a waste of time. Maybe he's drunk, maybe he's having a laugh, whatever. I can't help it. It's the way my brain works. When somebody's like, "Oh, what's your theory of life?" Um, are you talking about meaning and purpose? Are you talking about, I don't think there's any goal to life, just like I don't think there's any externally imposed purpose. I don't think evolution has a goal. I don't think we were a goal. Stuff happens and then you assess it.
Absolutely.
That's wild.
I agree.
All right. We got a couple other calls coming in. Egg is calling from Texas, pronouns are he, him. Egg's an atheist with a conservative family. And has a question for us. So welcome, Egg. You're on with Chris and Matt.
Hi, good to hear from you. So I'm currently eating dinner. I'm staring at a book called The Case for a Creator by Lee Strobel that I was given from my parents. I also have a conservative significant other, and they're in the God belief sort of mentality, and I don't know how to respectfully have conversations to make them think about their position, so that way I can narrow down what it is that they actually believe, that sort of thing.
Well, let's see if Chris has thoughts on this, because I'm not even sure I'm the right guy to ask, since I just talked about not respecting their beliefs. But this issue of how do you go about interacting with people so that you can better understand their beliefs and maybe get to a point where you can point out how and why you don't agree or why you think they're wrong?
I think it's hard. I think it's definitely a really challenging position to be in. One thing that I think can kind of help bridge that is, I think, asking questions, not at least coming across as accusatory or judgmental at first, but just ask questions. Find out what do they believe, why do they believe it? Like Matt always likes to say, what are their positions on things, and why do they think the way they do? And perhaps it could raise some curiosity in their own minds without you having to say, I don't believe you, or that doesn't make sense. Maybe it might click in their own mind that maybe something doesn't quite make sense. Not necessarily that that'll happen, but at least it's them thinking about it and not you making accusations. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to respond to that. If you have a question for me, I do try to ask questions. That is where I tend to
Are they receptive to those questions? Do you engage in, a kind of a good faith conversation about what you both believe about things, or is it difficult to get them to open up?
Well, let's go to my father, for instance. So he'll get stuck on a specific topic. So I'll try to direct the conversation to this is what I perceive the young earth creationist position to hold. And so I'll ask a question about that. Right. And then he'll bounce back to something in cosmology that neither of us has any understanding about, could not by any means argue reasonably regarding. And then for my mom, I feel like it's she's a little bit more receptive about the sort of questions that I ask, that she views me in sort of a, well, he's asking these questions from good faith sort of perspective, right? And then it goes back to my father saying, Satan is doing this and that and that. So especially when it's literally just the three of us, it's hard to get any ground.
So I guess I like Chris's advice of asking questions, but here's the thing. If your parents are just making assertions that they aren't likely to back up or explain, and you can't come up with a path to address it. What's your goal? Is your goal to convince them they're wrong, to change their mind?
No, just to view myself as well as my siblings as, like, generally speaking, it's not that Satan has affected us, because obviously, like, we don't believe in Satan either.
Sure.
And
so your parents think you guys are being controlled or manipulated by Satan because they believe in Satan and they believe that's what Satan does. And you don't believe in Satan,
Sure.
and you don't believe that's what Satan does. And you'd like them to understand. So it's like if somebody thinks you are delusional and you'd like to get them to acknowledge that from your point of view, you're not delusional. I don't know how to do that. It would have to be, let's define delusional. Let's address how we would go about identifying as somebody who's delusional. And so the questions, to pivot off what Chris was saying, the questions to ask are, how can anyone tell if Satan is impacting their life? Well, how would you tell the difference between bad luck, honest disagreement, or any number of factors, and Satan is actually manipulating your life?
I'm not sure I follow what you're saying. Do you want to clarify, or should I
I'm saying, so
give an example?
If my mom came to me and said that I was deceived by Satan, the question that I would ask is, how can you tell the difference? How can anyone tell the difference between me being deceived by Satan and me not being deceived by Satan, but you thinking I am? Because if they can't describe a methodology to show that their conclusion is warranted, then at a minimum, you can point out, can you at least understand why I'm not going to accept your conclusion? Why I don't think you have it. By the way, if you can't tell me what the justification is for your conclusion, then you're admitting that you have an unjustified conclusion.
Okay. I'm sorry, was it Chris as the other gentleman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sort of at a loss. I
Well,
might need to call back. Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to what Matt was saying too, which is, I think also something to think about in the situation, and Matt probably has more experience with this than I do, having religious parents, is kind of thinking about what kind of relationship do you want with your parents, given that divide that you guys have, because you're kind of in control of kind of how that works, at least on your end. And do you want, a relationship where you have those kinds of conversations, or is it too exhausting for you? You can set boundaries about what you want to talk about or not talk about, because they won't necessarily look at things in the way that you want them to. And where you want to set your boundaries is up to you and what you're comfortable with in terms of dealing with parents who are more religious than you.
Yeah, my parents and I don't discuss religion at all anymore.
I don't want to find myself in that position. I really enjoy the way that we're able to communicate, but it's like obvious that this is a major identifying part of their identity, and that I know it destroys them in their psyche, the fact that and they've said this in the past, that all or most of us have fallen away from the way that we were brought up, that now their grandchildren are in that same sort of position. And so, like, I want to at least put, you know, a, like, live and let die sort of, I don't know the correct terminology I'm looking for, to our relationships. So, like I was saying, that so that they don't feel terrible about the fact that myself and all my siblings and all this, like, don't care about the first 20 years of their life, right?
So, as I said, my parents and I don't discuss religion anymore because they've already acknowledged that they're closed-minded and not equipped to have the debate. They suffer every day because they think I am working for Satan. My ex-wife's grandmother thinks I am Satan, but my parents think I'm working for Satan. I'm not causing that suffering. Their religion is causing that suffering. It pains me. I am not happy about the fact that we can't discuss it, but if you get someone who's just going to acknowledge that they have the truth, they are not willing to discuss it or reconsider it, as sad as that is, you don't get to force people to have those conversations. And you're just going to have to come to grips with some people aren't going to change their mind, and some people aren't going to change their mind because of a conversation with you. Maybe somebody else needs to get involved. Maybe they're always going to look at you as their little baby, and there's nothing you can say that will make them ever really consider, oh, there's a possibility that Egg's right, or that, you know, we haven't looked at it from that way. You know, once somebody's completely convinced of a particular religious doctrine, anything you say that challenges that is that's just Satan. Satan is there to make their lives difficult, and he'll do that by coming at them through their kids. If they're not, you know, you're kind of almost saying, how do I have a conversation with someone who won't have a conversation, or how do I have a rational conversation with someone who won't be rational and doesn't value rationality? I don't know. If I knew, I'd be talking to my mom right now. I'd be talking to my dad right now.
Okay. I'm going to throw out an example of something that I had brought up to my dad. My mom was in earshot at the time.
Okay.
And it's, I essentially said, like, in order for Genesis to make sense to me, that we would need to see, like, these archaeological demonstrations of people passing over this region, or kangaroos going from the Middle East to Antarctica, you know, or Australia, that is. And that if people were able to find these remains of kangaroos, that would be something that would really turn science on its head and make them question, right? So something like really rudimentary speaking, that I don't know what I'm trying to say at the end of that sentence, but, like, I don't know if I'm proposing these sorts of things in the right manner, because I do actively think that that we do have conversations that can be beneficial, as long as my dad, for instance, doesn't put up a barrier and start talking about Satan, right?
I- I'm I'm trying to figure this out, um, but I'm not sure I'm following. So
Okay.
you told your dad what you'd need for Genesis to make sense, but what you talked about was in opposition to Genesis.
No, what I was trying to propose is if Genesis were true, then we would see that there is this at least some sort of remains available of kangaroos going this direction, or these three sons of Noah going X directions, right? That being regarding the flood in Babel.
Yeah, so basically you're looking for evidence of tales from Genesis?
Right. So if they were able to present such demonstrations, or these millions of dollars being funded into demonstrating that the Bible is right, that at the very least we should be able to distinguish, this is obviously when this language got created, or that these animals went that direction, or whatever.
Oh, well, we already know.
By now they should have found that evidence, right?
So what answer do you get when you ask for that evidence?
Well, at the time I got a non-response. It's also not been brought up since then.
Okay.
I
You're never going to get a response, because we know for a fact that the order of events in Genesis chapter 1 is in conflict with the scientific findings. We also know that Genesis's claim about the Tower of Babel being the origin of a diversity of languages is in fact false. We can trace languages back to different things, and that, like Spanish, French, and others come from Latin.
No, I'm with you there.
You're asking them to provide evidence for their claim, and you got no answer. And I don't see that you're likely to get an answer. I'm not even sure, given that they didn't make an attempt, that you're ever likely to get even an attempt at an answer, because people who generally understand this stuff don't tend to believe, at least not in the literal Genesis story. And so you're kind of asking them for something
I don't find that they, pardon me interrupting, I don't feel that they don't view it literally. I suspect very strongly that they view it literally.
Yeah, which means they're going to just believe the Bible. They don't need additional evidence, which means they don't have additional evidence, which means they're not going to provide additional evidence. If you think you have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe, who's conveyed to you in some way that this book is literally true, why would you need other evidence? I mean, if God's revealed that to you and told you that anybody who's challenging that is deceived by Satan, this is where you let go and let God. It's not my job. I mean, I can put my Christian hat back on. It wasn't my job to worry about how and why you guys were being deceived. My job was to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the power of God unto salvation. I didn't exist to argue with people deceived by demons, to try to object to the Bible. When they died, they'll find out.
And I just want to add to that to piggyback on what Matt said, I totally get the desire to try to convince somebody that they're wrong about something. I mean, Matt and I've had conversations about, wanting to type out long responses to people, and if only I can say the right thing and explain why they're wrong. I totally get that drive and that feeling that I need to explain this, and if I only say the right thing, they're going to know. But I think that in this case, it seems like you're arguing over things that wouldn't convince them either way. So it kind of seems like it's not really beneficial, because even if you could convince them of that, they're still going to believe, because they're not believing it because of that. They're using that as some kind of rationalization to justify the beliefs they already have. So I'm not sure that it matters one way or the other, that specific piece of evidence. It's that you guys are just kind of coming at this from kind of incompatible sides.
Yeah, maybe instead of having any discussion about religion, you could have a discussion about paths to discovering the truth. Because if their method for discovering the truth is to pray and exercise faith, and yours is to seek evidence, you're done. Like if you can't agree on how to figure out whether or not a claim is true, what else can you do?
I had something, but I lost it. I think I'm going to try to call back. I appreciate both of your time.
Yep. Thanks, Egg. And I wish you luck.
Thank you.
If you do find a way, let everybody know. Because all I was able to do was cope. It's a frustrating thing to have people, and I'm finding, we talk about this more and more. I'm not going to dig into it too much. I talked about it on Wednesday, and I talked about it on Thursday with my therapist. My entire life's work is predicated on the idea that a reasoned argument supported by evidence should be sufficient to convince rational actors. And as it turns out, I'm either living in a world where a shocking majority of people are not rational actors, or I'm fundamentally wrong about what will change their mind. And I mean that on every subject, from flat earth to fascism. It is it's wild to me. All right.
Yeah.
Possibly the final call for today, I'm not sure, but Mercurio, my apologies, in Indiana, pronouns are him, wants to ask me a question. So, hey, Mercurio, welcome to the show.
Yes, good evening, Matt and Chris. How are you both?
Not too bad, thank you.
Good.
Okay, good. So, Matt, there was a video you made. It was called "I Am Not Relevant."
Yep.
And before I watched your video, I had a presumption of a trend that I thought you would be talking about, and it is this: it's of how more people, especially some previous famous TV and online figures, they seem to be trying desperately to stay relevant. And by relevant, I meant I understood it to mean being like trendy, stay popular. But they're trying to stay relevant by doing and saying what gets more views, shares, and clicks, which is about some negative and crazy and idiotic content. And I was like, why would anyone want to do this? And this is what I've been seeing, a trend, this online. And why would people want to do this to stay relevant? Because it's just for attention. They used to get attention long ago, and that attention is declining. So for them to stay relevant, now they're moving towards saying and doing what's now trendy, which is like negative, crazy, idiotic, sometimes even mentally harmful stuff that makes us everyday folks, afraid and cry and yell. So I presume that's what you would talk about, and also that you would talk about. I don't know if you believe that, but that you would stick to truth and how we must all do this, regardless of how quotes relevant the truth is. And if it means you're not relevant, in quotes, then that's okay. And you would rather not be relevant and stay truthful
did you watch
than have to lie.
Did you
be negative?
to
stay relevant?
Did you watch the video?
Yes, I watched. Yes, I watched the video.
Because that's not what it's about.
But what I want to know is if, and you, Chris, can have an input on this. If this is actually a real trend that or this is a real trend that's happening.
Are you asking me
online?
Are you asking me if it's true that people are sacrificing truth for clicks and relevance and revenue? Yes. That's how the whole fucking world works now.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay. All right. So, and then for you, and I guess for you, Chris, you would rather if sticking to what's true, and that's how we must all do this, regardless of how trendy or popular or even relevant the truth is. And if it means we're not relevant, that's okay. And better to not be equals relevant and stay truthful than have to deceive or be negative or say like rage baity content just so they can stay relevant. Do you understand what I'm asking for your feedback on that?
My feedback?
Hello?
Yeah, I don't think I understand.
Both your feedback, like Matt's, your feedback on that too.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying, do we think people should stick to the truth instead of striving for attention by skipping the truth? And if that's your question, then yes, obviously. But that doesn't mean you're going to be paid attention to.
Okay, but do you also? Well, I mean, I don't assume this, but maybe I just ask: would it, if it means, would it? How do I put it? Would you? I'm not trying. Okay, would you rather not be relevant? So it's okay. Yeah, is it okay? Yeah, so it's okay that. If it means not being relevant, then that's fine with both of you and with us. Yeah, as long as we.
That's not what the video was about. That's not what the video was about. But I couldn't give the slightest fuck how popular I am. I care about how right I am.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That. Okay. That's what I wanted to. Okay. That's all right. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, but that's a real trend happening right now. That people are now they're doing this just for attention, trying to be negative.
I don't know. I don't know what their motivations are. Maybe they've genuinely changed their mind. I can't actually read minds. Maybe all these people that are now saying the opposite of what they said several years ago, like Asmongold, for example. Maybe he just has turned into a monumental piece of shit. I don't know. Maybe he's being sincere when he talks about wanting the people that he disagrees with to die. I didn't pay much attention to him before. I don't pay much attention to him now. I just hear people talking about it. Because I have never been a big fan of celebrity or prominence or anything. I don't care how famous somebody else is. I definitely don't care how famous I am. You either interact with me on a level where we're both human beings, or you can fuck off. And I don't care if you're, the president of the United States, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, the the most prominent scientists on the planet. I've literally called out, people with millions of views who I used to agree with, and millions of followers who I have shared a stage with. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't care. I only care about what's true and finding the best way to convince people of what's true.
Okay. Were you talking about Alex O'Connor? The other
When?
Online figure, Alex O'Connor. Were you talking about him?
When?
I thought that's what you were talking about him. Okay.
Just now?
I thought you were talking about Alex O'Connor. Yeah.
No, I wasn't talking about Alex O'Connor just now, but you can substitute him in as well.
Okay. And okay, what about you, Chris? What do you think about this kind of trend? If you notice this trend also.
I mean, I think that it's something that's been going on I don't think it's a recent thing. People chase clout and celebrity and are terrible, and that's been going on for millennia. I don't know. I think online discourse definitely makes people often, act terribly. But I don't think that a lot of it is new, or that there's a trend towards clicks in any significant way that already hasn't existed. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's what. Okay. So I guess if we agree that this has been going on, even with I don't know. There's a new Star Trek show that I've noticed it like really prominent, like overtly. It's called Starfleet Academy, and that's where I've seen it like really like out there. So, but yeah, I was thinking, what do you guys?
Why are we talking about Starfleet Academy right now?
No, no. It was an example I was given, but I was just I was just to confirm if you know about this trend, the trend that I've noticed. So
are we aware that people seek fame and clout? Yeah, very.
Okay.
Thanks,
all right,
Mercurio.
Thank you very much, Matt, for teaching me how to, fight liars, deceivers, idiots, and negative and harmful folk, who want to cause us pain. Yeah, thank you for teaching me and everyone how to fight such people. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. That's the last call that we're going to take tonight, but I haven't done a hostility in a long time, which means I spent all this time not lobbying anyone for super chats. And on a lot of these shows, we'll hang out and read super chats afterwards. And I never asked, so I think there's only like one super chat right now. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up with Chris. And if any of you want to get super chats in, we'll read them, just like we normally do on these things, because if you have something to say and you didn't feel like calling in and super chat's your way to do it, we'll do that. But right before we get to it, I have legit questions for you, Chris.
Okay.
What's next for I Bid You Peace?
Well, like I said before, I'm working on a kind of feature cut. So something that will be shorter, in addition to having the series as well. So we'll see how that goes. But that's something I'm working on, and we'll see what happens with it. I mean, I'm really proud of the series. It took me years and years to finish and put together, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into it. And I'm really proud of it, and I hope that people really enjoy it. I've had some good feedback from the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune, and some really great publications have talked about it. So I'm just excited to see where it goes and the reaction that it gets.
Do you have any idea of what's next after that? What's the next subject? How do you go about? Is it something you happen across, or do you have like I've got this chart in my room, and every now and then I look at it, and as soon as one of those things on the list goes, oh, do me, you do that one.
I do have a list. I actually do have a list of ideas that whenever I think of something, I put it down, and then I'll occasionally go and look at my ideas, and I do have a number of ideas. I don't know specifically. A lot of this depends on how this works out and how well this does. If I can then kind of branch off and start doing another project, because these things are expensive and take a lot of time and effort and money. So I'm hoping this one does really well, so I'll be able to move on. But I don't know specifically where I'm going to go. I have some ideas, but nothing nothing public yet that I'm working on. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I am for things that I know I'm going to see. I am incredibly anti-spoiler. Like I don't watch trailers. Um, I watch all of the Marvel stuff and all the trailers for all the Marvel stuff because I'm still either going to love it or be caught by surprise or whatever else. So like I watched the Spider-Man trailer that came out. For other movies that I'm interested in, I specifically don't watch trailers because I find they're going to spoil the movie for me.
Mhm.
It's really hard to spoil a Marvel movie for me. I'm either going to love it or hate it no matter what. And many of them I'll watch over and over. But for other movies, it's like, who were we watching an interview with? And they mentioned that there was a twist in their movie. And I was like, why did you do that? Now, from the second I sit down, I'm going to be like, oh, there's a twist coming. And I'm the type of person that will absolutely figure out not just the twist, but what I think would have been a better twist, type to do. And I'm waiting for somebody to do an absolutely banal, straight edge movie with no twist, but then in an interview, tell people that there's this big twist. So they're sitting there on edge. Like if I ever do a film, I will tell people there's a twist if there's not, just to fuck with the people like me.
I love it. I love it. That is
But,
great.
all right. We got a couple super chats to read real quick. And Arden will also get the website thing put back up here right at the end. But $10 from Blue Lear. My dad used to be a hardcore atheist. Now he's Christian. I know atheist doesn't mean necessarily rational. No, it doesn't. We could both rattle off a list of prominent names who have at some point identified as atheist, who I don't think we would generally consider as particularly rational. Being godless doesn't mean you've cornered the market on being reasonable or, and by the way, neither does identifying as a skeptic, even though in principle, I think it should. There's nothing about being an atheist that should suggest you're rational. There is something about being a skeptic that should suggest you're rational. And not even everybody who does that is going to.
I'm not saying anything. I'm being very good.
Well, read this one.
Oh, you want me to read that one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Take
my money. Jimmy, GFY?
Go fuck yourself.
Oh, right.
Jimmy's bad with compliments. So he's once upon a time, he said that instead of giving a compliment, he'd rather people say, go fuck yourself. And now everybody does. And now he's not as comfortable with that because he knows it's a compliment. Good job, Jimmy.
Interesting.
And I think that's the...
Is that all we got? Good, because I didn't announce that we were doing super chats. I wasn't sure. My apologies for not knowing how to do a hostility. It's been, I think, maybe since Bart Ehrman and I did one was the last time. But Chris, huge thank you, not just for the original documentary, the great interactions we've had over the years, and this new documentary, but for agreeing to come on and talk about it. I hope it gets more and more of an audience and that it does really well. So that your next project is even better and better received. But this was, I sat there and watched all the episodes, and I was like, "Ooh, I didn't know that. Oh, I did. Wait a minute, that." And then there were so many things that were thought provoking about how people were reacting to it, about the human condition, and we're dealing with abuse. We're dealing with sexual abuse of minors. We're dealing with the psychology of someone hiding who they are, someone with repressed sexuality in a ministerial position, and yet a massive public figure at some point, even if it's just in a smaller realm. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being my friend and for coming on and hanging out with me.
Oh, thank you likewise, Matt. And I hope we get to see each other soon.
Come on down. I got a guest room. There's not even snakes in there, but there can be if you want them.
I like snakes, so
There you go.
all right.
I do too. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks to everybody who called in. Big hugs out to Maureen and everybody who called in. If you want to support what goes on here, not only can you tune in to watch special episodes like Hostility and Calling It Now and Cus I Wanna and all those things, but there's a regular segment of shows you can like, you can subscribe, you can go to linemerch.com, and you can go to patreon.com/calltheline.